Good day, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. Uh, well, as you have already presented me, I will go straight to the presentation, right? So, it is okay, super. So first, just a bit of motivation and introduction. How do Danes heat their homes? Well, before 40 years ago, more or less, mostly was with oil burners, but slowly and steadily, uh, more district heating installations have been installed each year. And this district heating comes from sources more and more renewable, like biomass, like waste incineration, and and those are replacing other sources, old sources like coal and natural gas. But what is more precisely district heating? Well, it's a set of central generators that distribute heat to many distributed consumers like houses or businesses, right? Through a network of pipes. This has many benefits because it allows you to exploit economies of scale. It also allows you to more easily switch fuel sources, right? Instead of changing sources in each home, you can change it centrally. And that is makes it an essential infrastructure for energy policy. Oops. It's an essential infrastructure for energy policy. That was seen in the last couple of years with all the efforts to reduce the reliance on natural gas. And specifically for Denmark, most of this district heating production comes from cogeneration with electricity. Also, an important part of that is from municipal waste incineration. And there are many targets as well for the energy transition. Specifically, a target is that 90% of district heating must come from non-fossil fuels by 2030. Now, among these non-fossil sources, there is one that is waste heat recovery, which is basically capturing and reusing the waste heat that comes from other commercial or industrial processes and give it another use. So in this sense, district heating is very helpful because it allows you to take waste heat sources that are distributed in many places in the city and bring them to the consumers. It has many benefits. For instance, it first of all substitutes other conventional fuels. Is it more? Okay. Okay, so sorry for that. It substitutes other conventional fuels that allows you to reduce heat cost and emissions. And also, as a result, that improves your energy efficiency and energy security because you can use more local sources, especially if the waste heat is in the first place produced by electricity. However, to capture waste heat, you need some investment in networks to connect to the district heating network and in heat pumps to raise the low temperature of some waste heat to the level of the network. One interesting source of waste heat are data centers, which is where many of all this data is of internet streaming, right, is processed and stored. However, data centers are large and inflexible electricity consumers. I mean, we all want, when we go to YouTube, for instance, to watch the video right away, not to wait for a few minutes to ask, right? Or an email to arrive right away. But as we all know, servers or computers operating produce some heat. And when you put so many computers in a building like this one, which is a Facebook data center in Odense, Denmark, this adds up to a significant amount of heat. And in the last years, there is a significant expansion of data centers, of new data centers in several regions, Denmark, Ireland, the Netherlands. And this expansion is tying up renewable energy electricity capacity, right? Also increases energy supply costs, and it's a source of unused waste heat. More importantly, the industry, especially the large corporations like Google, Amazon, Facebook, they are striving for sustainability in their operations. So for them, it's quite attractive to make use, if possible, of this waste heat. On the right, you have the projections from the Danish Energy Agency about energy consumption of data centers in the next 10 years, up to 2035. And it is significant. It adds up to almost 10 in the mid case terawatt hours per year. But what does it mean in the context of Denmark? Quite a lot, actually. Here in green, you have data centers, which is estimated that by 2035, they will add up to 17% of the electricity consumption of the whole country. So that's quite a lot, and quite an increase, a short increase in a bit more than 10 years. So with this introduction, I will go to the results of my first paper of this PhD, which you can find here, and where our objective is to quantify what are the effects of integrating these large data centers, Danish data centers, in the Danish energy system. We look at this through different levels of integration. First, we add flexible cooling to the data centers. We don't mess with the actual business operations of the data centers, the servers. So for now, we just focus on flexible cooling. Another level of integration is recovering waste heat, connecting to district heating networks. And the last one is a combined integration, both of them. And then under that combined integration, we take a look at the different projections of the Danish Energy Agency, right? Because they vary quite significantly. So as for the methodology, we use the Balmorel energy system model, which has been developed for a couple of decades already in TTU in my university. This model optimizes the investments and operation of energy assets, generation and transmission, and for the entire energy system. We have a modeling scope that goes year by year up from 2025 to 2035. And we include Denmark and the neighboring countries, although we focus the results only in Denmark. And this model can be extended and has many add-ons for many different sectors of the energy system. In this specific one, in this study, we include the electricity sector, the heating sector, synthetic gas and hydrogen, and we extend the model to include integrated data centers. What do I mean with that? We include the cooling system of data centers so they can choose on which cooling options they can invest. And then we analyze how those decisions within the data centers affect the energy system overall. So we have several scenarios. The first one is the baseline business as usual, where the data centers need to meet a cooling demand in their server rooms. And they have two options: free cooling when it's cold outside, simplifying it a lot. It basically means you open the window and let the heat out. And when it is not sufficiently cold outside, you use an electric chiller. And the second scenario, where we integrate with the electricity system, is we add simply a cooling storage, a thermal cooling storage, where then the data center can choose when to operate these cooling systems to store the cooling and use it when they need it, right? So then they can actually use electricity for the cooling operations when, for instance, it's cheaper. The third scenario, it's waste heat only, right? So we include a heat pump where the heat pump produces cooling, and then the rejected heat goes to the district heating network. And finally, a scenario with all the options included. As for the results, first we will focus on the impacts on the district heating. We see that the heat pumps in data centers invest in heat pumps first, and those new heat pumps displace other options for electrification of district heating networks in the future. This is basically, firstly, heat pump, other centrally heat pumps like air source heat pumps, and as well as electrolyzers. More importantly, we see that if we combine the integration, the flexibility, and the waste heat recovery, we can actually recover 57% more heat and reduce the capacity of heat installations as well, which is translated after into cost savings. All in all, district heating, waste heat recovery, it can cover between 15 and 22% of the national district heating supply by 2035. On the electricity side, first, we see marginal effects of cooling flexibility on the electricity side. There are some, but they are minor. The major effects come from the effects of the displaced district heating central heat pumps. Because the heat pumps that we use in the data center, they heat from a higher temperature, so they are more efficient than the other one taking heat from other sources like air. This means we need less electricity, which is translated into less capacity as well for the energy transition. Specifically, this is lower production from solar, which is the most expensive renewable that we see in Denmark from the conventional ones. But aside from needing less electricity, Denmark has higher capacity for energy exports. They can export 10% more in the case with only heat recovery, and 19 in the case with combined integration. Summarizing the effects on cost and emissions, first we see that cooling flexibility has effects on cost because you need less capacity for cooling, but that is mainly within data centers. And secondly, it has relatively no effect on carbon emissions. Mostly data centers already source their electricity from renewable sources. And then in terms of emissions, in terms of the combined flexibility, combined integration, we see that synergies. We see that system costs are reduced more in this scenario than in the other two combined. They can reach up to 5.1% of the total national system cost first. Secondly, we see some effects on carbon emissions, although this is in the short term. For instance, we can see that in 2025, we can save 2.1% of national carbon emissions, but over the whole after, for instance, in 2035, this change is largely non-existent. Why does this happen? Is because in the short term, waste heat recovery can displace some sources like coal or fossil heat. But after 2030, the system is largely decarbonized. And lastly, we take a look at the growth projections for data centers. So here we run an additional scenario, first, which is no data centers, this black continuous line in here. And then we compare what are the additional costs of non-integrated data centers, so business as usual, and what are the costs of fully integrated data centers. Non-integrated data centers are the red line, integrated data centers are the green one. So in terms of effects of cost, we see that integration can offset around 60% of all the costs that come from data centers, of the additional costs that comes from data centers, and that these savings are larger after 2030. They become larger and larger as more data centers come into the system. In terms of carbon emissions, we see something very interesting, that actually integrated data center can offset all the additional carbon emissions from new data centers, plus some more, 80% more. And however, this effect happens mostly at the beginning of the analyzed period, and after that, these two lines remain parallel. So there are no additional carbon savings to be made. So some takeaways of this analysis is basically that waste heat recovery from data centers compete mainly with other sources of electrified district heating, and this in turn reduces the amount of new capacity that's needed for the energy transition. In this case, solar. We see marginal effects on energy supply from flexibility, but it still has some cost savings for data center operators. We see that full integration, combining waste recovery and flexibility, unlocks larger benefits to both data center operators and society. And that although this rapid increase of data centers is seen as a challenge for the energy transition in many cases, with integration, they may become a tool for effective and cost-efficient decarbonization. But importantly, to realize that policy should focus on promoting a rapid deployment of waste recovery to actually save carbon emissions now that the system still produces it. And second, incentivize these combined operations. So actually you can unlock these synergies that we see in this analysis. So thanks all for your attention. I'm open for your questions.